State media confirms North Korea is mass-producing next-gen missiles. They explicitly link these launches to a recent geopolitical crisis. This is the kinetic theater you are intended to watch. It is loud, visible, and a calculated diversion. The missile narrative is a fallacy of focus. It presents a symmetric threat with a symmetric, high-cost solution. Adversary protocol, however, is not built on symmetry. The primary vector is not kinetic. It is silent. The objective is not a high-cost exchange, but asymmetric leverage. According to CSS analyses, the central nervous system of the American Imperium is not its carrier groups, but its data infrastructure. An attack on this vector, undersea cables, satellite, uplinks, does not create a crater. It creates a systemic vacuum. The protocol is not launch on warning. It is cut on crisis. This activates the blind Leviathan protocol, a state with unmatched kinetic power, but its eyes have been removed and its nervous system severed. Its assets are afloat without orders. Its markets are frozen without data. Analysts note that U.S. kinetic actions, such as a potential strike on Venezuela, are read by rivals not as strength, but as a blueprint for overextension, proving the Leviathan is most vulnerable when it moves. The true threat is not the adversary's weapon, but our own fragility. The core motive is not ideology, it is solvency. When a state's internal liabilities reach a terminal velocity, it is compelled to export kinetic risk. According to analysis from CSIS, unpopular wars often correlate directly with severe domestic economic distress. They are not a bug, they are a feature, a solvency protocol designed to externalize a domestic liability, enforce capital controls, and reprice the state's geopolitical credit rating through force. This is no longer a theoretical risk for the United States. The mathematical certainty is a matter of public record. Treasury Secretary Yellen has issued a direct warning regarding the growing threat of fiscal dominance to the U.S. economy. This is the clinical term for a pre-insolvency event, where a nation's debt obligations become so immense that they dictate monetary policy, overriding all other economic objectives. The system is forced to print money to service its own debt, a terminal feedback loop. Adversaries read balance sheets, not press releases. They interpret this fiscal weakness as a blueprint for exploitation. The U.S., over-leveraged and committed to high-cost conventional platforms, cannot absorb a symmetric shock. This dynamic forces a pivot to asymmetry for its rivals. It is a rational economic decision. The kinetic cost must be driven down, while the strategic impact is maximized. Observe North Korea. Their announcement of the mass production of next-generation guided anti-tank missiles is not an isolated event. State media explicitly links their military escalation to the recent geopolitical crisis. This is the solvency crisis in action. A smaller power, observing the fiscal constraints of the hegemon, invests in low-cost, high-leverage kinetic tools to create a credible deterrent and challenge regional power dynamics. This weakness emboldens larger rivals. They recognize that U.S. commitments are becoming non-credible because they are fiscally unsustainable. As Reuters analysts report, a potential U.S. kinetic intervention in a theater like Venezuela is perceived by China as an opportunity to test U.S. resolve over Taiwan. Each regional crisis drains U.S. liquidity, both financial and military, transforming every flashpoint into a zero-sum test of a fracturing imperium's solvency. The core equation of modern conflict is now public. A recent analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, quantifies the kinetic cost curve. A $5 million main battle tank can be functionally neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. That is a 10,000 to 1 tactical liability. This is the democratization of violence in action. The barrier to entry for projecting lethal force has collapsed to the cost of consumer electronics. This is not a hypothetical. State media confirms North Korea has activated serial production of next-generation guided missile systems, a direct reaction to what they term the recent geopolitical crisis. They are exploiting a systemic vulnerability. For every high-cost asset the U.S. must field through debt issuance, an adversary can engineer a low-cost counter, turning America's solvency crisis into a launch-on-warning protocol against its global force posture. The primary theaters of conflict are a misdirection. While media attention is fixed on legacy flashpoints, the operational staging grounds are located in what strategists term gray zones. These are regions of perceived stability, used as proxy laboratories to test U.S. response protocols and political thresholds. They are not the cause of the conflict. They are the symptom of a deeper solvency crisis. Adversaries are exploiting a simple kinetic cost equation. The cost to project U.S. power is exponentially greater than the cost to create a credible threat. North Korea's move to mass-produce a new generation of guided missiles is the blueprint. According to state media, this is not for a speculative war. It is for serial production, active now. They explicitly link these launches to the recent geopolitical crisis, demonstrating a launch-on-warning posture designed to provoke a disproportionate financial and military response. This is an asymmetric economic attack vector. A U.S. kinetic strike anywhere, even on a secondary target like Venezuela, is not interpreted as a deterrent. According to Reuters analysts, it is viewed as a live-fire demonstration of U.S. operational limits, emboldening rivals like China. This transforms regions from neutral territories into strategic liabilities. Adversaries are incentivized to place low-cost kinetic assets in these gray zones, forcing the U.S. to allocate high-value resources to police them, creating systemic attrition. The entire protocol is predicated on a single internal American liability: fiscal dominance. The term itself is a warning from the U.S. Treasury Secretary. The mathematical certainty of this insolvency crisis means the U.S. cannot afford to sustain multiple high-cost interventions. RUSI and CSS reports indicate adversaries are no longer planning to defeat the U.S. military. They are planning to bankrupt it. The gray zones are simply the most cost-effective arenas to accelerate that process. Therefore, the next 12 to 18 months will not be defined by a single large-scale war. The protocol calls for a networked crisis, a series of synchronized, low-cost kinetic events in disparate gray zones, engineered to trigger a systemic, high-cost U.S. response. The objective is to force a national liquidity event. The flashpoints are a distraction. The target is the solvency of the U.S. Treasury. The launch-on-warning doctrine is a relic of an analog age, a protocol hardwired into the U.S. command structure. It dictates that a retaliatory nuclear strike is launched upon detection of an inbound enemy launch, not upon its impact. The logic is simple. Waiting for confirmation means your own silos are vaporized before you can respond. It is a mathematical trap designed to guarantee mutual destruction. Now, introduce the fog of digital war. According to CSIS analysis, the primary vector for a decapitation strike is no longer a physical missile, but a cyber attack that blinds the early warning system. If the radar screens go black, the commander faces a protocol paradox. Is this a system failure? Or is it the prelude to an impact he can no longer see? The doctrine forces his hand. Fear of paralysis compels him to assume the worst-case scenario. He is forced to launch on a ghost. This is no longer theoretical. Adversaries have built the tools for this specific scenario. State media confirms North Korea has begun mass production of a new generation of high-precision guided missiles. The kinetic cost for them is low. The strategic leverage is absolute. They don't need to defeat the United States kinetically. They only need to create sufficient digital noise to trigger the launch-on warning protocol against itself. This blueprint for exploitation is activated by U.S. liability. As Treasury Secretary Yellen warns of a growing fiscal dominance threat, adversaries calculate that the U.S. cannot afford a conventional war of attrition. This incentivizes asymmetric attacks. As analysts noted regarding a hypothetical U.S. strike, such actions embolden China's territorial claims. Every U.S. kinetic action in one theater is interpreted by rivals in another as a system-wide stress test, an invitation to probe for weaknesses, like the digital seams in the nuclear command chain. The protocol for challenging a fracturing imperium is not a launch-on warning scenario. It is a solvency test. With U.S. fiscal dominance now a declared systemic liability, the kinetic cost of global power projection becomes mathematically unsustainable. Adversary blocks do not need to guess. They have the blueprint. The next phase, therefore, is calibration. Analysts at CSIS and RUSI have documented the vector. Smaller powers, observing U.S. kinetic overextension in arenas from Venezuela to the Pacific, are incentivized to build leverage. North Korea's shift to mass production of advanced kinetic tools is not an isolated act. It is the creation of a deniable, asymmetric arsenal for the highest bidder, explicitly linked to recent geopolitical crises. The calibration shot will not be a missile. It will be a systems kill. Within the next 12 months, anticipate a coordinated logistical paralysis of a Tier 1 U.S. port, for instance, the Port of Long Beach, for a period of 48-72 hours. The vector will be an attribution impossible cyber event targeting the terminal operating systems. The objective is not physical destruction, but to collect data, to measure the precise lag time between economic shock and kinetic response from a state facing a liquidity crisis. The attack will be officially attributed to a non-state ransomware group.